All right. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. The day is today, 8 March, where the whole world commemorates the work of women, acknowledges the work of women, but also talking about challenges that women go through in various aspects of their life. So I'm really happy to have Ms. Lindiwe Sibande Khoswe on the webinar today. Like I said, for the sake of recording, I just wanted to repeat that these webinars are held as part of the wider conversations that we've been having as part of our commemoration for the International Women's Day. We've had amazing speakers, wonderful women coming in to talk to us about different things. And today we're going to talk about harassment in the workplace. And I just wanted to introduce our speaker today. So Ms. Lindiwe studied law at the University of Warwick, followed by her master's in law at Harvard Law School. I tell you, when I always say that we are having smart women here, we are having amazing women here, we are having people who have broken the glass ceiling and really showing us the way. I want you to understand, and I'm so privileged and honored to have Lindiwe come here. So after completing the legal practice course at the Malawi Institute of Legal Education in 2022, she was called to the bar in 2023. In 2026, Ms. Lindiwe initiated her professional journey, postmasters, serving as a legal assistant for the public interest law firm in Boston, USA, where she supported cases on asylum, immigration, and child custody. In 2017, she joined the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as program associate in the immigration division, contributing to the management and implementation of the African Union Commission's immigration program. And then in 2017, she joined the European Union delegation to Malawi, supporting the management and implementation of the delegation's governance and political portfolios during the contentious 2019 elections period in Malawi. I hope that you remember that time. In November 2019, Ms. Lindiwe assumed the role of Alternative Justice Program Officer at the Irish Rule of Law International, and later becoming the Southern Region Program Coordinator in January 2023. Currently, she spearheads the Irish Rule of Law International's expansion into the Southern region of Malawi, focusing on prison decongestion efforts through magistrate and homicide camp courts, magistrate cell visits, as well as empowering vulnerable groups to enforce their rights through legal literacy clinics and community awareness programs. Additionally, she contributes to the capacity building by providing support with bail applications at the Malawi Legal Aid Bureau and conducting training for public interest and private pro bono lawyers. So that's a very comprehensive bio there. You can see that she's well-traveled, she's well-educated, she's well-informed about the law in Malawi, and she has worked in various sectors as well. So today she's going to talk to us about harassment. And so I'm really thankful because in our previous conversations, we've had women asking specific questions about office harassment, sexual harassment in particular, and really wanting to know what is there for women. How can we handle it? How can we report it? How can we protect ourselves against that? And so thank you so much for thinking about that, because it's a real struggle. So Lindiwe, I know that this introduction here is more about your professional life. I love to know people personally, because I know that behind all this, there is a human being. And so who is Lindiwe as a person?
Yeah, I was about to say that you comprehensively introduced me. I didn't know what else to say. So it's really great that I get to talk about who I am as a person, because I think, sometimes we are so used to introducing ourselves based on like our career taglines or our educational backgrounds. And I think, like you're saying, there's a person beyond just what you do or what you've studied. So, yeah, as my name is Lindiwe. My friends call me Lindy. Friends and family call me Lindy. Um, and what can I say? I'm a lover of humor and sarcasm. Um, I am a third culture kid, which basically means that I grew up in a country or countries that were not my original passport country. Um, so I was born in Malawi, but because of my dad's work, we moved to Zambia when I was 8 years old. And then we moved to Tanzania when I was 11. And that's where I spent the majority of my teenage years up until university. And then I went to do my first degree in law at the University of Warwick in the UK, and then my Master of Laws at Harvard Law School. And then I joined the AU after that. So I was in Ethiopia. And then in 2018 is when I came back after I think we had left Malawi in 2003. So came back in 2018. And yeah, I made a home for myself in my original home. It was not easy because you're starting over in a country that's meant to be your home, but it doesn't really feel like home. So I think I'm very grateful now. I have a great community of people around me, and so yeah, I think in terms of my background, that's basically it. And yeah, love traveling, love nature. And I think in terms of just to add on to my career background, I don't think I've taken um, the conventional course of becoming a practicing lawyer. Like you mentioned, I was working for the AU and in public interest. So I started out mostly in public policy, international development, and then now working on access to justice. I really, I was very adamant about not taking the bar exam, but I realized after a while that I was actually limiting myself career-wise. So I made the decision in 2022 to do the bar exams here in Malawi and be admitted to the bar. And I felt like, that would help me serve my community a lot more, and, use my education to, empower vulnerable groups a lot more than if I didn't have that qualification. So yeah, I think that's basically it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I remember that when you and I spoke before, we talked about, harassment in the office, and it comes in different shapes and forms. So maybe to begin with, I want you to share with us if you've ever experienced harassment in your life, because sometimes, we look at lawyers like, no, you can't push them. It doesn't matter where they are. But I was shocked that day that you have had your fair share of harassment in the offices. I want you to share with us that. But also, I want you to just share like the different forms, like how do we identify harassment? How do we tell that this is harassment?
Yeah, so I think this is why I didn't want to name this sexual harassment only, because like you're saying, I feel harassment comes in different forms, and it's not just sexual harassment. There's bullying, there's other forms of harassment that you can experience at the workplace. And I'll share maybe three distinct scenarios that I have gone through. The first was my first ever job. that was an internship that I took on before I had even finished university. It was after my first year of university. I felt I needed some level of work experience working at a law firm. And so, I got the opportunity to work at this law firm. And, first day we
Was that in
are being,
Malawi? That wasn't in
that
Malawi.
was in Tanzania.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am being onboarded for my first day at this internship. And I'm being introduced to everyone, and I'm introduced to my supervisor. I go sit down at my desk. I'm waiting to be given tasks. Somebody tells me my supervisor is looking for me. And so I go to his office, and, I'm expecting, that this person will give me work. And it he did not give me work at that moment.
Mm.
And he basically just started saying like very inappropriate things, and just complimenting me. And I was just very confused. It was my first ever work experience in my life.
Yeah.
It was not something that I was expecting. I
And you were
must have been
younger too,
17.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I must have been 17 or 18 at the time. So it was a very confusing experience. And this person was 10 years plus my senior. So yeah, and this kept happening every single day. I would be called into his office, and he would just ask me to sit down. Sometimes he would just be silent and he would just look at me. And then he would tell me to go. And then I think the next week, we were supposed to go to court together. And I'll tell you, I was terrified because I would be, alone with this person in a vehicle going somewhere. And I didn't know what would happen. And so I think the day before that happened, I just decided to quit the job. Um, and I remember just feeling so downcast because it was my first ever work experience. And I felt like I was really letting go of a good opportunity. But I was really, uncomfortable. I was scared. And I think we had talked about Togo um, not really having, as part of the onboarding process, um, sexual harassment or like a harassment kind of like policy being
Policy.
told to
Yeah,
you. So I
absolutely.
didn't know that, whether that law firm had that policy, I have no idea. But I really didn't know who I could go to. And at that point, I just decided to take matters into my own hands and I quit. And a week later, I am talking to a friend of mine, and she's asking me how my job is going. And I said, well, I quit. And she asked me why. And I said, well, my supervisor was harassing me. And she said, I thought so because I'm going through the same thing. And I am really looking forward for, this thing to be done so that I can just go back to school because I'm also being really badly harassed. And on the one hand, I felt validated, but on the other hand, I felt like I had failed because here's a friend. She's going through the same thing that I am, but she is persevering, right? We talk about persevering. And I quit. So really, I had let myself down. I felt like I had let, um, people who helped me get that opportunity down. And I felt like, quitting was me being weak or displaying some sort of, just a lack of strength. Um, and so, speaking to other people and other women about it, they kind of reinforced that feeling to say, men are just like that. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be quitting every single job because like a man is harassing you, then you'll never have any opportunities because that's just how it is. And that's why, I term this, a rite of passage or an infringement on rights, because it seems like we treat it as a rite of passage, right? Like women go through this, it's normal, suck it up and, ignore it. That's perseverance. Um, and so, later on when I had another job opportunity, I was like, you know what, this time I'll do it right. If somebody comes to me, propositions me in any way, I will persevere. And so, in a later opportunity, I had another supervisor who, it started out with just like comments here and there, and then he just point blank asked me out. And, I just said, I have to respectfully decline. And it seemed like that's where it was going to end. He was like, I was just joking. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Wow.
I wasn't being serious or anything. So I
Wow.
was like, great, okay. This means everything will be okay. And, I've persevered this time. So I've done it right. No, that's not what happened because in the following weeks it became the most hostile work environment I have ever worked in because that rejection turned into hostility and it turned into bullying now. And so, because I had rejected his proposition, it turned into just an environment where um, it was very toxic. And there were moments where I could only express it as somebody trying to get you fired, trying to do so many things to just make your work life very unpleasant. And I remember just dreading going to work every day because I would have to face this person every day who was intentionally trying to make my work experience very negative. And so, I reflected on that. And in my mind, I was like, okay, so quitting isn't the answer because you're losing out on opportunities. But then saying no also doesn't seem to be the solution because then that harassment or that sexual harassment turns into bullying. And so what's the solution? What am I doing wrong here? Um, and I think that's placing undue pressure on women to say this is something that you're supposed to find a solution to. I don't think that that's fair. Um, and so, that's why I think it's really important for us to have these conversations because, it's not something that individual women should be placed with the burden of dealing with in their workplaces. And, I witnessed something similar with a friend who confided in me that one of our colleagues in a previous work environment was also harassing her. Luckily, she had somebody who was a bit higher up and connected, and she got herself moved from that department. She was also on the brink of quitting, but she got herself moved from that department to another department. But then this person caught wind of that and confronted her to say, you told people I was harassing you and, all this stuff. And in my mind, I was also thinking this can't be the way that we deal with things.
Yeah.
We need to protect victims. We cannot be, allowing people to be confronted in this way. And so, yeah, I think like in Malawi, I don't think a lot of people know that there are actually laws that mandate
Right.
um, workplaces to actually have sexual harassment policies. And, that's the Gender Equality Act actually mandates workplaces to have policies that aim to eliminate sexual harassment. But, I was speaking recently to somebody, to a friend, and they said, and I shared the same experience, which is never in any of my workplaces have I ever been told that a sexual harassment policy exists. Um, and maybe it does, or maybe it did, maybe it doesn't. But to make that known to people and to actually follow through with that is something that personally I've never witnessed. Yeah.
Awesome. This is quite interesting, and I love talking about this because personally I've had my fair share of sexual harassment and just bullying, in the work environment. And there had times where I had to quit.
Mm.
I want to talk about perseverance because I think a lot of women, we take the bullets and we're like, you know what, I'm gonna endure. I'm gonna
Mhm.
I'm gonna persevere. I'm gonna hold on. Because to be honest with you, there is few opportunities for women out there. And sometimes
Yeah.
if you secure a job, you would have worked really hard to get to where you are, and you want to protect it. And also, I think it's the guilty feeling that, there's people who have helped me to get here,
Mm.
and I owe to them. I've done A, B, C, and D, and sometimes it's just a guilty feeling, thinking that maybe this organization has invested so much in me, through training, capacity building. How do you handle that? Like, how do you look at that? Like, how far should we endure?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I don't think that I have all the answers, but it's a very good question for women to be asking ourselves because like you're saying, not only would you have worked hard for this opportunity, and jobs are scarce globally, but especially in Malawi, and especially for young women who are just starting out. But also, some people just don't have the privilege of quitting their job. For some people, they're taking care of family, children, other family members, extended family, themselves. So I was in a privileged position to be able to quit and still be able to go home and have meals and be okay at the end of the day. But there are women who this is literally their bread and butter, and they have no other place to go. And if they let go of this opportunity, it literally means that their means of provision is gone. And so talking about choices or, it doesn't exist. And so I think it is our duty as women who are informed to really empower other women who might not be, and uplift other women. And I think it's really up to us to bust that myth, to say this is normal. This is something that happens to everyone, suck it up. I think we should really look at the next generation, see what we have gone through as women in this generation, and say, this stops with us.
Right.
And we don't want, women who are coming after us to have to go through the same thing that we did. Like it's really not a rite of passage. And I don't know when that narrative stuck, but we really need to deconstruct that
Yeah.
and actually look at how we can prevent, because it's also not about like reactionary measures, but looking at um, measures that actually try to tackle the issue before it even comes up.
Absolutely, absolutely. In my friends circle, I would say that 99% of my friends who are, strong, powerful women have been sexually harassed in offices. And so you can imagine that if that happens to people who are like middle to top managers, right?
Mm.
Happens a
Mhm.
lot to people even on the lower cadres. And I
Mhm.
think it's time that we really have these conversations, even in our work environments. I think we need to be vigilant in a way that when
Yeah.
we get to a work environment, the first time when they're onboarding, if we see that, the sexual harassment policy is not coming up, we need to take action and ask about it to say, how do I report it? How do I address if in case this happens? A lot of people don't want to hear that, because to be honest, the mindset out there is that it can't happen here. But the thing is that mostly these things happen in private, and people don't want to report just because they are scared of, you know, creating a hostile environment or maybe losing their job. And so they suck it up and they keep going. Memory, I'm seeing your hand up. You can unmute. And everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can also raise your hand so that we can continue. Yeah, Memory, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Lindiwe. Thank you, Togo. Actually, I don't know if it's a comment. It's a kind of question or comment. When I want to comment on sexual harassment at work, because it's something that troubles my mind for so long. Sometimes I'm like, where can I just go and just speak it out? Because I'm the one of the victims on sexual harassment at work. I've maybe 2 jobs I had to quit just because of too much pressure on sexual harassment. You find like all the male workers, your superiors, everyone is harassing you and don't know where to report, and you are scared. If I report, people will say, the way you are, people harassing you, things like that. So you get disturbed, traumatized, and sometimes depressed, because you really don't know where to go, where to report, because you know, sometimes the world, the way it can judge you, you'll be like, I'll be more depressed. People will know what I'm going through and the like. So last year, I had to quit last year because of my, you know, my superior, my director, the one who was also sexually harassing me. And I had no choice. I had responsibilities, yes, but I was like, no, I can't take this anymore. So I had to quit. But I had nowhere to, like, who should I report? These people, they have money. If I go to court, maybe this will not even take, it will not even go far. Maybe he can just give money out and the like, and I'll just be a loser. Everyone will just know I was being harassed. And then you just end up like, no, let me just keep quiet. Sometimes it's the society that we're in that keeps people to stay quiet, even if they're being harassed. So I don't know, how can we help such women to report so that they're at least free? You know, if you're being harassed, it mentally affects you, even your productivity, your motivation. You get traumatized even to be like, if I apply for another job, I'm not going to meet the same things. Yeah. So you just end up confused and you don't know what to do. So I don't know, how can we help such? Thank you.
And Memory, before Miss Lindiwe come in, I just wanted to comment that the other thing too is the blame, right? I've had to experience situations where I confide in my colleague to say, you know, this person is doing this and this to me, and they'll be like, no, you seduce them. No, the way you interact with them. No, the way you dress. That's why they're doing that. Oh, why are they not doing that to me, but they're doing that to you? So it's the blame that goes around. And sometimes even when you think about going to the courts, right, to say, maybe I can pursue this through the courts, maybe to seek judgment, to seek, you know, justice over this. You think about your career, you feel like if people know that I took this person to court because of this, maybe they won't give me a job anywhere, because they'll look at me as a difficult person, you know? And so there is that fear too.
Yeah, definitely. And I really think this is why we really, as I mentioned, need to take this burden away from individual women. I really don't think that it's fair to be placing, you know, this as an individual issue when clearly it's a universal experience. It's not something that, you know, women who are less educated experience, or like women in Malawi. If you talk to any woman anywhere in the world, you will find that this is a common ground that we have, unfortunately, as we're navigating the workplace. And I think it starts with having, or like you were saying, Togo, if you see that there are no workplace policies for sexual harassment, speak up to say, you know, as part of my onboarding process, I noticed that this isn't a thing. Is it something that exists? And you know, from there, then you can see how you proceed. If it's something that doesn't exist, you know, pushing your workplace to say this is something that's really important. People need to know what will happen if they are being harassed. And actually, that starts with the definition of what harassment is, because for some people, let's say, for instance, like a friend of mine was saying that it's not always a physical thing, right? It's not somebody inappropriately touching you or even saying something very overt. It might just be over friendliness and over familiarity.
Yeah.
And so you go
invading of personal space.
Yes. Exactly. And so you go to your HR and you say, this person is doing this. And they're like, you know, that's just how they are. They're just really friendly. And so having a clear definition in the policy of what sexual harassment is really important as a starting point. And actually, you don't even need to go far because that's provided for in the law and under the Gender Equality Act. And it's actually a very broad definition, which encompasses even nonverbal acts that are perpetrated by somebody. And so also just bringing it to the attention of your workplace that you're not in compliance with the law at this point, if you don't have a sexual harassment policy. And I think, you know, having clearly defined reporting mechanisms is also really important. Having people who are actually assigned to be the receiver of reports of sexual harassment, that people know that I can go to this particular person to report this thing, and also have proper investigations in place is really important. I think people prize anonymity when it comes to reporting sexual harassment in the workplace. So people don't want to be put on blast, because then that really deters people from reporting in the future. But ensuring that it's an anonymous process and it's an impartial process as well, because then you also don't want to have a situation where people feel like, you know, justice was not done, and maybe the situation was just like not very impartial or neutral. So having that as part of the policy, and also training people on the policy as well. There's no use having a policy if nobody knows about it and nobody knows what entails, or you know, what it entails. You would actually also have to train people on it. And that's, you know, members of both genders. It's not a women's issue. It's an issue for everyone to be aware of. And also having support for victims, like what was being said. We live in a culture where, you know, it's a place where silence is golden, and people really prize non-intervention. But having proper support for victims of harassment and sexual harassment is really important, and ensuring that there's a principle of non-retaliation as well. Like, you know, the example that I provided for my friend who was confronted by the person who was harassing her. Clearly, the organization failed her in that instant, because they should have had a policy where you cannot retaliate against a potential victim. but it really does start with us speaking out, and really denormalizing this.
Absolutely. I want to see if there is anyone with a question, but while we're waiting for people to come up with questions, if there's any, yeah, I remember that in my experience, I want to emphasize the point that, you know, harassment or sexual harassment whatsoever is a global issue. Actually, I was part of a discussion one time where we said that, you know, what we see in terms of reporting is just the tip of the iceberg. There's that is happening, that is unreported, that is tolerated, and that is not really coming out. And one of the things that I think we need to strive to come to a, you know, to the realization is that even the fact that victims feel they need to be protected, actually that is something that we need to come to a place where maybe in the future we can break that, to say, well, someone is in the wrong, they're in the wrong, right? I don't feel the very fact that I feel to be anonymous when I'm reporting, you know, I feel that is already wrong, because it's like separating someone, and we want to protect someone because of what? And so my desire is that we'll get to a place as a community, as a society, to say we cannot tolerate sexual harassment, and so we can just come out and really call you out to say this is wrong. And like you said, that a lot of times maybe it's very difficult even to identify harassment because it's not physical. And so when it's not physical, people fail to identify it, right? So I have, for example, had a colleague when I started my first job in Canada, who would comment on my body parts. You know, it was a positive comment, but it was inappropriate, right? And this person is white, and he's senior, and beyond that, he would every time after we usually had, like, you know, meetings every day, briefings every day, and after that then we'll dispense for work. He would come straight to my desk and just sit right on my desk, like very imposing, like very, like, you know, he's in my personal space, and I had to report it. And I'm like, after telling him to say, this is inappropriate, I feel uncomfortable. You're too much closer to me. Go away. And nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nobody took that seriously. I had to buy a placard. I kid you not. I had to buy a placard and put it on my desk that says that this is not a gathering place. And people were laughing at me, but I was like, I'm just trying to survive. And that place, I realized down the line that they didn't have a sexual harassment policy, and this is in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. No, I was speaking to a colleague of mine as well, and you know, I was just asking her about her experiences in Ireland, and whether this is maybe something that is mostly concerned in Malawi or in a lot of African countries. And she said, no, this in my previous workplaces, I was not told of like a sexual harassment policy either. And yeah, I think we definitely minimize the harm that it actually affects. And you know, as the previous lady, I've forgotten her name now, was saying, it's something that really affects you mentally. It's something that affects your productivity. And like, you know, I was saying earlier, you know, I would dread going to work every day, and I would just be looking at the clock to say, you know, when do I get to go home, because I'm really tired of this bullying. And I think employers also need to be made aware of that fact, to say, you know, this is actually also, I mean, not to say that like that's the most important thing, but it's also affecting the way that your workplace is operating, because productivity is low because you're not dealing with the work environment that you're putting people in. And I think like in Malawi as well, just, yeah, the minimization of to say like, oh, like words can't hurt you. Like it's just words. If he was like inappropriately touching you, then maybe you would have something there. But like you're getting upset over words, like just, yeah,
It's
push it
culture.
aside. It's just
Yeah,
words. Yeah, exactly.
it's culture. Someone actually put something in the comment. Let me just read it. I think it's Grace. She says that it's the evidence part that's really makes it difficult to pursue such cases. So so I want to ask you, Miss Lindiwe, like a very like a question related to this. So you don't really have physical evidence, but there is actions, there is words. How do you pursue such cases, or how do you collect your evidence towards those cases?
Yeah, so like I said, I think luckily we have a law that's actually quite broad in the way that like it defines sexual harassment. If I can just pull it up now, you'll be able to see that it even includes non-verbal acts, which kind of, I don't think that this is something that I have personally come across as a case in real life, but just speaking to the text of the law, it basically says it's engaging in unwanted verbal, nonverbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. And if it becomes offensive or an offense, if a reasonable person would anticipate that the other person would be offended, humiliated, or intimidated. And so it's something that's quite broad. And I like the fact that in the law, I think a lot of women must have been involved in drafting this law because it doesn't start with the physical. It actually starts with verbal or nonverbal and then or physical. And so I would hope that in that case, it's something that's all encompassing. But also, I think if we really go back looking back in our own experiences, a person who does this does not just do it to one person.
Yeah.
They're usually repeat offenders. And so I would say that there's strength in numbers as well. So not necessarily, I think it's up to everyone whether they would want to go ahead and report. I don't think anybody should be forced to do something that they don't feel comfortable doing, but there is strength in numbers to say, we really can't all be lying. I mean, at this point, that would just be negligence on the part of the employer to say you personally are lying. So again, it goes back to what we've been talking about, which is deconstructing this thing to say it's a rite of passage. It's something that happens to every woman, get over it. But if we're actually having honest conversations in the workplace with each other to say, this has been happening to me, and then you'll find somebody else say, yeah, that person also did that. And so, that gives you, I think, a better kind of basis for you to go and say, this is something that's happening to a lot of us in this work environment, and we would want something to change.
Absolutely. And the other challenge, I just want us to be very practical here, because when it comes to sexual harassment in particular, we want to pretend that every woman is against it. But the truth of the matter is that there is women who enjoy it, because we come to the work environment with different, personalities, but also backgrounds. Some of us are coming from broken homes where we've been abused by our spouses or our partners. And then when we come to a work environment and the supervisor or someone is really praising you for your looks, they're talking positively about your legs, you enjoy that. You kind of like accommodate that because it's like something that you really don't get at home. And so we accommodate it, we tolerate it. It doesn't sound or feel any painful. right? Because
Yeah.
for a person to report sexual harassment or to share it with someone or to complain, it means that they are against it. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of women who are tolerating it because they're enjoying it. And that's just the truth of the matter, right? I want you to talk to us about that, especially the dangers of that. And because your topic has part of it to say, is it an infringement or is it a rite of passage? Because sometimes we feel that, oh well, I can tolerate this to an extent. What does that do to your career? You're enjoying it, yes, but how dangerous is that to you as a person, but also to just your career in general, regardless that, you know, you're having fun, you're enjoying it. And sometimes, you know, it starts as sexual harassment, but people take it outside the work environment. And then it's a relationship, it's a blossoming relationship. You know?
I think maybe on the one hand, we should separate women who are not aware that what they're experiencing is sexual harassment. Because definitely, like for me, coming into the workplace at such a young age, you know, like I said, I was 17, 18. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that it was wrong. I was just like, I'm very uncomfortable, but nobody had ever really told me what it was. And so I think for a lot of women, and especially because the aftermath of that was people telling me that it's normal, I felt like there was something wrong with me, that I thought that there was something wrong with that. Yeah, because if it's normal and I'm not taking it as a normal experience, then
something wrong with
that's
you.
on me. Yeah, something's wrong with me. So I do believe that there are genuinely women who don't realize that what's going on is sexual harassment. And they haven't really been kind of like supported in that way to be able to know that like this is actually quite inappropriate. And I think on the other hand, then I wouldn't really necessarily term that as sexual harassment because, like I said, like in the definition, it's unwanted acts. So if this is something that is voluntary, then it doesn't fall under sexual harassment. But to your point of saying, what does that do to your career? People talk. That's something that I have seen in my experiences is you kind of obviously, like, you know, sometimes it's just workplace gossip and it's just really, really bad. But you do, if you engage in that, it minimizes your achievements. Because everything that you will go on to do after that, people will say it's because. And it's because. So that's why. So even if you want to, at the end of it now, run away from that, it becomes very difficult because you maybe like you started out early in your career, kind of like accepting such acts. And so that kind of taints your image and it kind of like follows you along. And I know that this is very like, you know, double standards because men do not experience the same thing. And actually, I feel like it's the opposite for men. I mean, people do say here and there, but I think it's more impactful towards women's career, and that might actually block you from further opportunities if this is something that, yeah, it's definitely something that follows you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much for that. And really, yeah, you're right that we need to separate because sometimes it's out of ignorance that we literally don't know what is going on. And we don't really understand that sexual harassment. So it's very important that women know what sexual harassment is and is not. Boss Maflira put something in the comment. Thank you so much, Boss, for being here. He says, I wish it was mandatory that all workplaces have the harassment policy, considering that it is the law and as Lindiwe has put it, and indeed that it is made aware to all workers and employees. Once someone starts work, this should be one of the documents to be part of the orientation. It is sad to learn that those institutions that have policies, it is not even made aware to the employees. It's so true. It's very, very true.
Very, very true. And actually, I think it would be good to also have like certain like surveys as part of an onboarding process, so that everybody kind of, you can gauge as an organization where people are at in terms of their knowledge of sexual harassment. So having a survey for people to fill out to see whether they would be aware either that they are sexually harassing someone or they're being sexually harassed is also an important thing to do, as maybe even part of an interview process. I wish that we would get to a place where that actually happens, where, you know, people are asked, you know, do you think that doing this is appropriate?
Yeah.
And, you know, if they say yes, then there's a problem there that you have identified. So yeah, I think but it only starts if we actually, again, denormalize this.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked at another organization. Wangani, I can see your hand up. I worked at another organization, you know, like how we do fire drills. Yeah, we had moments like throughout the year when we had like sexual harassment drills. And so every employee had to participate. It was kind of like, you know, a kind of like of a survey, but really in person, but you have to answer certain questions and to just do a self-check in terms of sexual harassment, in terms of your verbal language, your body language, the way you approach your colleagues, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to get to a place where organizations can really do that. Wangani, go ahead. You can just unmute.
Okay. Thank you so much for the very informative conversation. I actually just have a question with regards to the post-reporting phase. What are the possible outcomes of the reporting phase? Can you say something to that? I know it could be a case-by-case thing, but at least to have an idea of what could possibly happen when one does report their case. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like you said, it is like a case-by-case basis. So within the policy, I think there would hopefully be some kind of clarification in terms of what the consequences of being, you know, found that you have sexually harassed someone. So that could be anything from suspension to even, you know, you being fired at the end of the day, if that's the solution. And the law actually even imposes a fine. I think it's a 1 million kwacha fine or something if somebody resorts to the law. And I don't know if like yeah, I think it's mostly a fine. So you know, I think it's important for the harassment policy to also have those consequences put clearly, to say maybe you're giving a first warning, maybe you're giving a second warning, you're placed on suspension, and then you're fired or something like that. And yeah, and also obviously like communicating that to your employees so that they know that whatever they do has certain consequences. It's like any other workplace, whatever, if it's like negligence, whatever, whatever would be found, there's usually some level of consequence that's put there.
I also think that I think we need to advocate for, you know, consequences on the organization or the company or the business, because sometimes I think there's a lot of negligence in these organizations. can we put the onus on them to say, if you don't implement these policies, or if we have within a year repetitive cases of sexual harassment, then we'll take away your business license or something like that. We'll put you as an organization on suspension. Because I think when we put the onus on them, it will translate into, you know, putting those policies into practice. Like Boss said, that there are organizations that have policies, but they don't make that aware to the the employers, and so employees. And so what that means is that, yes, you have the policy, but are you being vigilant implementing that policy? Are you putting in practices? Are you translating that policy into practice? So you as an organization, the onus should be on you. Can we take away your business license and suspend you from practicing, or from, you know, running as an organization for a couple of months until you fix this?
Yeah. I mean, I think the law just generally says that it's the government's duty to ensure that workplaces have policies on sexual harassment, and then the enforcer is the Malawi Human Rights Commission, if I'm not mistaken. But it just seems like it's not really a priority, because I don't really, like you're saying, I don't really see any consequences for organizations for not having a workplace policy in the first place. And I think, like we're saying, that's a universal experience. And I think this is also an area that as we, you know, there are a lot of hotspot areas for women's rights. And it just seems like this isn't really one of them. Because again, we've normalized it so much, like this is okay. This is not a big deal, that it kind of like, when we're having these conversations around International Women's Day, it's not even really part of what we usually talk about. So if us as women as well are not seeing this as important, then who's going to do that for us?
Absolutely. Pirilani, you have a question, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
Okay. So it's not really a question. It's more of a comment on what has been the deliberations.
Pirilani, do you mind telling us your surname? And thank you so much for being here.
All right. Sorry. My name is Pirilani Kumaserera. I'm also known as PK, and I'm chiming in because I'm a recruiter. I have two companies under which I have like 4 or 5 people. So,
can I spill the beans before you go ahead? Because I just wanted to be sure. Can I spill the beans that Pirilani will be one of our speakers upcoming? And I'm really excited to have him. So go ahead, Pirilani.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction, Toko. So the reason why I joined this is because this is something that has been at the back of my mind for the longest time, because I am, as a boy, as a man, you know, I hear the conversations that men usually have when they're talking about a girl or a woman. And it's mostly sad because mostly women are just looked at as sexual objects, you know. They're not appreciated maybe usually for the capacity that they bring, their mental abilities, or any other skills that they have. Mostly what guys like to focus on are the physical attributes of a woman. And it's a very prevalent, as you're saying, globally, even in Malawi, I think it's worse, because even if you go to small groups of men, you hear the comments, they're just so misogynistic about girls, about women, and all they can think about mostly is, you know, that aspect of the human nature. So I've had an experience as a recruiter with sexual harassment, not towards me, obviously, but among the organization which I was leading. You know, there was this guy who eventually managed to, you know, convince this woman, and then they started an affair, and then she ended up pregnant, and then because he was married, and she got scared, and then she had to abort. But I could see the damage that had, the impact of the damage that had on the organization. So she was missing work. So certain things were not being accomplished. So I think this being part of this conversation and just hearing, Lindiwe and you, Toko, and other people who have commented on their experience with sexual harassment, it just elevates my understanding now as a recruiter, the impact that this has, even the mental impact that has on the person on the receiving end of this kind of habit, and how that also impacts the organization on the larger scale. Because if you're a girl, if there's a lady who is supposed to be taking care of something, but she's not able to because mentally she's not in the right place because of this behavior, then obviously the organization suffers. So on my personal part is, I think we need to do better as recruiters. We need to have this as one of the biggest priorities. When women come, they should feel like this is the safest place to be, because their rights are protected, their personal space is protected and respected. But I know that this is not going to end soon because of the mentality that especially male people have towards women. I think it's something that we need to start thinking about initiatives that we can have that targets on an organization by organization basis, because there are certain bosses that will look at this and be like, yeah, we'll look into it later on. But there are certain people, for example, like myself, who becomes aware of this kind of thing through an initiative like this, and start to taking like serious measures to make sure that, this is a safe place for employment for everybody, regardless of their gender, and everybody needs to feel their best when they are here. And there are those people who are going to take those aggressive measures to make sure that those workplaces are protected. So it's more like a challenge to everybody who is here. Maybe you can start my initiatives that are focusing organizations on their own capacity and just raise awareness of the impact. I don't know if there are research projects or surveys that have been created on the number of women that get sexually harassed and the impact that has on their productivity, on their happiness in general, and their ability to contribute to the general progress of that organization. So I just feel like maybe that is one of the things that we can do to make sure that this at least begins to get addressed on a serious level.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for that. I think there's a lot that we can do, and you don't have to be anyone. You just have to be an employee, a concerned employee, and you can start an initiative at your work environment, your workplace, to say, we don't have this policy, let's put it in place. And you don't have to be the technical person to do that, but you can initiate that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So, Ms. Lindiwe, before we close, I want to give you an opportunity to give your final words or comments to us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I think like we've been saying, this is a very important conversation to be had. It's something that we can no longer afford to be swept under the rug. And it really starts with us as individuals, bringing this to the attention of our employers. I think, like we've talked about, this is something that is part of our law. Unfortunately, it seems like it's something that's not really taken that seriously. But having that in mind, I think moving forward, we should really take this as an opportunity to really challenge what we've normalized. Unfortunately, I feel like we've somehow all been part of this normalization. And so, yeah, I think if we want something to stop, it really does start with us. And I think it's good to know that this is, well, it's bad and good to know that this is not an individual experience. It's something that is a universal experience, but it doesn't have to continue that way. And we can definitely find ways in which we can preempt these things before they even take place. So yeah, I would say that.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate you being here, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us about sexual harassment. I've enjoyed every part of this conversation. I wonder, how can people reach out to you if at all that is possible? If we have further questions, if we can we connect you on social media? Are you on social media at all? Can we connect with you on LinkedIn? Are you there? Is it possible for us to send a message to you maybe on LinkedIn or somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. I am on LinkedIn. Full name, Lindiwe Sibande Khoswe. On my LinkedIn. I guess I am on Instagram and on Twitter. Not as active on Twitter, but a little more active on Instagram. It's Lindy Love with an underscore. And then Facebook as well, Lindiwe Sibande.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And everyone, I really, really appreciate you being here, your support and your presence being in this space has really contributed to the value of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to having you in the future webinars. Like I said, we are having these webinars almost every week. So just follow us on our social media pages. That's where we're making announcements of the next coming speakers. But most importantly, I want to share again about the in-person meeting, our conference that is happening on the 15th. That's not this Friday, but the next Friday. And I'm really excited and looking forward to meeting you there. Please make sure that you secure your spot. There's amazing prizes to be won. The moment you register, you enter into a raffle draw. We have our partners and sponsors bringing in different prizes to be won. So you don't want to miss on that. But most importantly is the quality of the speakers that we are bringing in and the depth of the conversations that we're going to have. So I'm really looking forward to having you. And thank you so much for being here and for being supportive. I wish you a happy International Women's Day once again and a great day.